The Lover's Pentacle, Chapter 5, The Moon. Karina drove back to FIU after dropping off Kain and Jack to their home. And when she had sent that anonymous letter, she hadn't expected for Jack to seek his son so quickly. Karina didn't know what to expect of Jack's or Kain's father. All she knew of the guy was that Jack was a failed rock star and a recovering addict. As someone who was impulsive by nature, Karina was starting to second-guess her decision. And when she arrived to FIU, she came to this conclusion. Families were supposed to stick together both on the good times and especially in the bad times. This was how her family wrote, and she smiled gleefully thinking that she had done a good deed by forcing father and son to reunite. Karina ran to her classroom in order to cram for her finals, and once it was finally over, she breathed in a sigh of relief. And whether she did good or bad, it was irrelevant. Even with a D, she was going to pass. And she went to pester her counselor after this examination, and the counselor gave her the good news. She had met all of the prerequisites to graduate. It was finally over, and this summer Karina was going to be a pediatrician. Now she just needed to complete the minimum 1-year residency in order to get her medical license, and when her education concluded, Karina could now devote more time into turning Kain into her perfect husband. The alternative was to return to the dating scene, and it could take months and even years before running into a decent man in Miami. Karina drove to Kain's home to tell him the good news, and when she got to the parking lot, she saw a green Plymouth Fury. And she backed up a bit and she waited to see who was going to come out of the house, and when she saw that it was Eugenia, Karina's blood began to boil. She simmered in rage for 10 minutes, and as soon as her competition drove away, Karina breathed in a sigh of relief. Karina knocked and Jack opened the door for her, and the two didn't have time to chat since Jack was extremely late for work. Karina entered the house to see how Kain was doing after his accident, and he was in the shower cleaning up the dirt and grime. And she picked up his dirty uniform and she threw it into the laundry, and since she was nervous, she started to clean Kain's house, starting up by dusting the bedroom, and she noticed that his computer was running a long process, and she read an open composition book, and Kain was running a background check on his finances using the information that Eugenia had given him just to be safe. And he was going to investigate her husband, and he was doing the bare minimum work within the confines of probable cause. Karina didn't understand why Kain was helping out that woman who had tried to sue him, and she looked at her reflection in the vanity and she didn't like it. And she signed before running to clean the house, and Kain had never cheated on her, and he was too lazy or comfortable to find himself another woman whenever she was around. Karina repeated this to herself while she fastidiously cleaned. The shower closed and Kain stumbled back into his bed. And what did the bimbo want? Asked Karina. She begged me to find dirt on her stepmother or niece, explained Kain. It is a little cliché, but she promised to pay me for my work. What is she going to pay you with? Asked Karina, choking her broom. With a donation for my co-worker, said Kain wearily. Unlike me, they work really hard and they deserve to see proper remunerations for putting their life in danger for the sake of citizens who see them as the enemy. And she also promised not to bother me ever again, regardless of the results of my investigation. After all, she is but a stranger who expects men to become her little lapdogs just because of her beauty. Aha! You admit it, hissed Karina. You think he is prettier than me. Karina, everything hurts and I don't feel well. Please, protested Kain, placing a pillow over his head. It will take more than a bump on your head to kill you, Kain, said Karina, coming over with one of her jealous rants. And what does the bimbo have that I don't have? Get out of my house, Karina, yelled Kain, sitting up. Karina turned as white as a sheet, and Kain rose from the bed, and the color from his face was completely gone. Karina took a step back, and Kain walked towards her. Karina closed her eyes, expecting the worst. Instead, Kain staggered towards the bathroom to throw up his breakfast. Karina ran for the phone, and she called her mother. The adrenaline surge must be going down, said Unla. His accident was really bad, Karina. Why were you arguing with him? What's wrong with you? I wasn't arguing, lied Karina meekly. Don't you think I don't know my own daughter? Seriously, Karina, said Unla. Give the man time to decompress. Karina hung up the phone and she tiptoed back to the bedroom, and she opened the door slowly. She found Kain still throwing up, even though his stomach was empty. Karina brought him a glass of water and got him back into bed, and she proceeded to sanitize the bathroom, starting with the toilet. And she had inherited from her mother the compulsion to clean everything whenever she was nervous, and while she cleaned she pondered what Kain had offered to help Eugenia, and in her jealous fury, the only conclusion she kept coming up to was that Kain had feelings for Eugenia. Karina, I didn't ask you to clean the bathroom, moaned Kain. I want to sleep and the noise you keep making is making my headache worse. Karina picked up the cleaning supplies and she made the extreme effort of being as quiet as a mouse. And she got bored seeing Kain sleeping, so she saw herself out. And she needed to prepare for her graduation ceremony, and there was the after party. Karina went through her entire contact list to inform her parents, uncles, aunts, cousins, and distant the relatives that she was graduating. And she started walking around the yard. And the backyard ranting on the phone. And then she noticed that the grass looked a little tall, and she went to the storm shed and she brought out the lawnmower. Kain awoke as soon as he heard the lawnmower sounding, and he wanted to tell Karina to keep it down, but he was far too weary to leave the bed. Resigned to his fate, Kain reached for his headset and he turned on some classical music in order to drown out the noise. With this measure, he was able to fall asleep again. Karina finished cutting the grass and she even trimmed the hedges, and she looked at her gardening work and she saw that it was good. With nothing else to do, Karina returned to the house to see if Kain was still breathing, and since he had his headset on, Karina returned to fastidiously clean the house. And she saw Esther driving up the house, and since her man was no longer going to be alone, Karina returned home in order to begin the preparation for her graduation party. Karina lived in a small house behind a larger mansion owned by the matriarch of the family, Barbara. Her mother, Unla, was the little sister of the matriarch, and therefore she lived in the smaller three-bedroom house in the center of the two properties. There was a communal garden with a thatched roof gazebo, a treehouse, a pool, and a variety of fruiting trees. Her house was mainly where Karina slept. Throughout her youth, Karina seamlessly moved between the two houses. Barbara owned two clinics, and every member was expected to fill a spot in the family business. And when Karina was born, all of the spots were full, so she was allowed to follow her dreams. Karina tried a bunch of different career paths while in high school, and she eventually decided to become a pediatrician. The first thing Karina did when she got home was inform her relatives that she was graduating, and that night her family did an impromptu party. Barbara was always looking for an excuse to throw a big celebration, and just a few days ago they had celebrated the wedding of their pet macaws, like their little birds. Nobody bothered to inquire why Karina's boyfriend was not at the party, and since Barbara saw that Karina's relationship was stagnant, she decided to interfere, and her interference came in the form of Bruno. He was a lawyer friend of her older son, Rodrigo. Rodrigo and Bruno had been roommates and they had played college football together. Rodrigo felt that his friend would be a good match for his cousin since both were allergic to casual relationships and they had ridiculously high standards. Karina drank and danced and was merry, and she looked at Bruno over the top, and she thought that her Aunt Barbara had excellent taste in men, and there was something particularly charming about his discount Che Guevara beer, and she also liked his intense green eyes. And his entire being emanated strength and determination, and taking the initiative, Bruno invited Karina to dance. Bruno ranted about his work as a defense attorney while Karina bored him with her medical jargon, and both were talking, but neither of them were having a real conversation. Karina didn't know anything about the law, while Bruno couldn't find his prostate to save his own life. You seem like a sharp individual, and what are your plans for the future? Asked Karina. For the time being, I'm on the prowl, said Bruno. And when you find what you're looking for, what do you plan to do? Asked Karina, drawing closer. Bruno answered Karina's question with a kiss. The two exchanged numbers and the plan for a future date. Karina didn't feel guilty about kissing another man. In her mind, Kain had already been replaced. And when the party died down, Karina went to rest in the hammock to stargaze and to feed the mosquitoes. And even with the anti-mosquito lanterns, the little critters were biting. Karina stoically ignored them while she stared at the three-quarter moon. And she had until Saturday to decide whether to bind herself to Kain. She had until Saturday to decide to bind herself to Kain. Karina thought on the events of the night and how quickly she had jumped into the arms of another man, and she traced with her finger the lines in her palm. Irina was right. She was a selfish lover. Why did I kiss Bruno? Said Karina to herself. I just met the man. He's awfully pretty. Auntie really knows the type of man I like. And why did he have to have green eyes? That Karina has a weakness for men with green eyes. Karina reached into her pocket and she brought out her cell phone to check the time. And Kain was probably asleep, and with the distraction of school out of the way, Karina finally had time for self-reflection. And why am I always self-sabotaging? Asked Karina. I wasn't able to be faithful for 1 week. And if you're done feeding the mosquitoes, please come inside, said Unla. And there's something important we need to talk about. Karina went into the house to speak with her mother, and the moment she entered within, she became aware of the mosquito bites. Karina took a shower and she changed into her nightgown. And while Karina was busy fooling about, Unla had gone to tend to Jack's newly acquired wounds. And she gave Kain something to help him sleep his nauseous. And when Karina faced her mother, she had the feeling that she had done something wrong. Do you know what it means to be married? Asked Unla, removing her wedding band. Marriage is a promise that you will support one another in sickness and in health. I stayed with your father until the bitter end, and you couldn't even spend a single night with your ailing boyfriend. His grandma was there, said Karina meekly, and he told me to leave because I wasn't letting him sleep. And what were you doing while he was trying to sleep? Asked Unla. I was cleaning the house, said Karina. Karina, said Unla. And what were you thinking about while you were cleaning the house? I was thinking about this ginger bimbo that is wasping around my man, protested Karina. Honestly, Karina, your man is ill and you're thinking about your competition, said Unla, shaking her head sadly. Kain has never cheated on you, and if after all this time you do not have faith in your bond, then why are you still together? I will have more faith in him if he agreed to marry me, pouted Karina. A wedding ring won't cure you of your jealousy, said Unla. While your father lived, I never doubted the strength of his devotion to me. But that was because he was always so devoted, said Karina. Dad was always doing cute romantic gestures, and he showed you every day that he loved you, but Kain, he isn't the romantic type, said Unla. Every person is different, Karina. It isn't healthy for you to look for your father in every man that you date. Karina yawned to illustrate her desire to hit the hay. She wasn't in the mood to talk about her dead father. When she was 5, her father was diagnosed with cancer, and he battled with the illness for 2 years before succumbing to it. And during that time, his health fluctuated like the waxing and waning of the moon. And there were days when he seemed good as new, and during those days, life returned to normal. But there were nights when he spent it coughing up blood. And in order to get away from the situation, Barbara would take Karina out, and she would only bring the girl home when her father's negative symptoms subsided. Karina knew that her father was having a bad day whenever she saw her mother fastidiously cleaning the bathroom. And then one night Karina's father was gone, and it was his last wish that Karina wouldn't see him dead. Karina wasn't even allowed to go to the funeral, and she only found out that her father was dead after he had been buried. And since Karina never saw his corpse, there were nights where she would sometimes forget that he was dead. And during those delirious nights, Karina would suffer major tantrums when she demanded to see her daddy. And the solution that Unla found was to redecorate the house to have it serve as a visual reminder that their life was never going to be the same again. That night, Karina dreamed that she was cleaning the toilet, and she looked up to the window and she saw the blood moon. And blood began to seep through the tiles, and regardless how much Karina cleaned, more and more bloodstains manifest. Karina turned her head and she saw the open bathroom door, and resting on top of the bed, hooked up to a machine, was the shape of a man. Karina walked towards the sick bed, but regardless of how much she walked, she couldn't reach him. And the man turned his head to look at Karina, and Karina awoke screaming, "Papa!" Karina was bathed in a cold sweat, and with a trembling hand she looked at the lamplight. And with its gentle glow illuminated her bedroom, she breathed a sigh of relief. There was something childish about her choice of room decor, and everything was a combination of soft pastels, pinks, and yellows. Her bookshelf was dominated by medical tones, and beneath it there were the art books and fashion magazines and other visual mediums. Karina wasn't much of a reader, though she liked to browse through art books. The only totem from her childhood that she kept was the dollhouse, and we would amuse her to be decorated, and the current residence of the dollhouse was her tiny bunny plushie named Nana. Nana was the last gift that Karina had gotten from her father, and Karina left her bed and she opened the dollhouse and she brought out Nana. And Karina petted her little bunny nervously, and her mind was still filled with distorted visions of her nightmare. And she saw a strong pale light seeping through the windows, and when she opened the blinds, she saw the moonlight shining down on top of her pillow. Karina moved her pillow to the other side of the bed, and that way the moonlight would fall on her feet instead of her face. And she closed the blinds again, and she attempted to fall asleep. Nana, they say that a little bunny lives on the moon, said Karina, talking to her plushie. The bunny is constantly grounding earth needed to make the elixir of immortality for the gods. They sure keep him busy, said Nana. Nana didn't speak, rather Karina altered her voice to make it sound like as if the bunny was speaking. Nana, do you think Kain is alright? Asked Karina. Why do you care? Aren't you more interested in green-eyed Bruno? Asked Nana. Bruno, that man is such a bore, said Karina. I truly do wish he didn't have green eyes. Green eyes are my favorite. Karina fell asleep thinking about Bruno's green eyes, and she awoke an hour before noon, and she had overslept, and she left her bed and she started to look for Nana, and after flipping the bed and all of the covers, she saw that the bunny had fallen from the bed while she had tossed and turned at night. Karina returned the bunny to her dollhouse, and she wasn't in the mood to go residence hunting right away. She decided to take the rest of July as a sabbatical. Karina took her morning bath and she had the light breakfast, and she went to the main house to see if her stay-at-home mom Mira was around. And there was a note on the fridge that said that she had taken the kids and her cousins to the beach. And since nobody was at home, she checked her messages. Bruno had not called to check up on her, and if she called him first, Bruno was going to have all the power in their relationship, or so Oprah claimed. Her boredom overcame her common sense, and she called up Bruno, and he didn't answer. A few minutes later, she got a text saying, "Court is in session." Karina, feeling stupid, remembered that Bruno worked for a living, and he wouldn't have time to entertain her for a while, and she would call him back at 5 p.m. And Karina, after examining her options, decided to join her cousins at the beach. And she drove to Miami Beach, and she parked beside her aunt's van. And once she found her family, she strayed down to her bikini, and she laid down her burden beside her aunt, who was reading a book. Karina swam in the ocean for a bit, but the water was choppy, and the waves kept tossing her about like a rag doll. And when she got bored of swimming by herself, she went to assist her nephews in forming a sandcastle. I saw in the morning news about what happened to your boyfriend, said Mira, putting her book down to switch to gossip mode. Did something happen to Bruno? Asked Karina. Sheesh, auntie. A guy kisses you once at a party and suddenly you change allegiances, said Jennifer, age 13. It isn't my fault that I like Bruno. He has green eyes, protested Karina. You know I have a weakness for green-eyed men. Eye color isn't a strong foundation to build a relationship, Karina, said Mira sadly. What else do you like about him? I like the way he dances, said Karina. And he must move well in the bed sheets, I wager. If you were at least over the last 4 nations, then we would understand, said Mira. But you always leave, sometimes for the right reason, but most of the time you leave over petty things. Are you afraid of commitment, auntie? Asked Jennifer, and she too joined the others to nitpick Karina's past relationships. Pile it on, protested Karina, and her cousin George, in answer to her request, piled sand on top of her head. And Karina checked the time, and she saw that it was 5. She tested Bruno to see if he was done with his case. Bruno again claimed to be busy with work, and she went to the public bathroom, and she dusted her hair, and she changed it out of her swimsuit. She drove to court to see if her boyfriend was lying to her. And Bruno was just getting out of the courtroom when he saw Karina asking the receptionist to see him, and he laughed heartily seeing her barking orders at the poor woman. And he couldn't decide if Karina was desperate or psychotic, and Bruno began to silently judge Karina. Karina, recognizing that judgmental look and pouting, said, "They are like that because I'm not wearing a bra." "I wasn't looking at that," said Bruno, lost in contemplation. "I am merely taken aback by your presence. It was only a kiss. It is far too early for you to be stalking me." "I'm not stalking you," said Karina, offended by the accusation. "Why, you here then?" scoffed Bruno, and he started pacing around Karina, as was his habit whenever he wanted to intimidate a witness. Don't forget that Bruno's like a lawyer, so he's like, tick, 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 tick. I wanted to, would you stand still? It is pretty hard to have a conversation with you circling around me like a vulture, protested Karina, closing her fist and stomping on the floor. I am still in work mode, said Bruno, carefully measuring his words, and he started pacing the floor in order to stand uncomfortably close to Karina. Please excuse my poor manner. It wasn't my intention to make you feel uncomfortable. Karina placed her hand in Bruno's face to push him back a bit, and Bruno took that hand and he kissed it with reverence. Karina's unpredictability amused him. Karina giggled at the romantic gesture, and Bruno's co-worker and his client shocked at seeing the contrast between the sandy, hobo-looking girl and the sophisticated lawyer. Bruno walked past Karina in order to return to his work, and the case was still being decided, and he was not the type of man who liked to lose. Bruno went to his office to ponder on the problem he had created for himself. The problem could easily go away if he told Karina he wasn't interested. What is going to be my next move? said Bruno, staring at the chess set he had in his briefcase. Karina left the court, extremely embarrassed to be there, and she had made a scene over a guy that had only given her a kiss and a phone number. Karina felt her cell phone vibrate, and she had gotten a text message from Kain. Congratulations on your graduation. I hope all your dreams come true. "Ah, that's so sweet," said Karina, and she texted back a smiley face. The two proceeded to communicate with emojis, and Ken eventually mentioned that he had the rest of the week off, and his Uncle Ken needed to get his nephew a new patrol car, or so he claimed. Ken wanted Ken off the street because he had yet to catch a guy who had rammed into his patrol car. And after texting for 20 minutes, Karina felt like driving back to her house, and when the light was red, her phone vibrated. And since she was a responsible driver, she continued to drive home without looking at her messages. And while she drove, she made mental plans. And she was going to shower, and then she was going to take her boyfriend Kain out for dinner. And since he didn't have work, Karina fancied that the two could make a love all night long. And maybe I could convince him to let me tie him up again, said Karina, giggling. Or maybe we could try something new. What haven't we done yet? Karina arrived at home, and she prepared for herself a bubble bath, and she was going to exfoliate herself in preparation of the long night she had ahead of herself. And with the candles lighted and her face cream applied, she entered the steamy hot water, and she thought of all of the things she wanted to do to her boyfriend Kain, and she dozed off in the bath for half an hour. And she could have easily slept for longer, but she had a nightmare. Karina dreamed that she was at the beach, and the illusion and the only illumination came from the ridiculously large moon. And Karina looked down, and she saw that her hands were fat and her fingers tiny, and she was a little girl again. And she felt someone taking her hand, and Karina turned to look at the stranger. The stranger was so tall that she couldn't see his face. His eyes shined green under the moonlight. The man moved his mouth, but Karina wasn't able to hear what he said, and the crashing of the waves drowned the sound of his voice. The man began to walk towards the ocean, and Karina was left behind in the safety of the shore, and she saw that the man was walking deeper and deeper till he disappeared beneath the waves. The waves retreated before crashing right on top of Karina, and when she awoke, her head was submerged under water. Alright, that's the end of that chapter. Bye-bye.